Nothing excites people like ancient, forgotten civilizations. Thousands of enthusiast historians and archaeologists are trying to unravel the secrets associated with them. Ancient Maya and Sumerians, Aztecs, inhabitants of Atlantis, Amazons, everyone heard about them. But there's still no consensus why they disappeared. In Kazakhstan, there was a nation that Homer wrote about. The Persian king Xerxes and Darius feared them. They were considered to be centaurs, and Persians believed that they had magical properties. The tribes of the ancient Sakas, what secrets this civilization keeps, what the ancient land can tell about them, where the city of Issyk now stands, and why this place is now considered sacred. The territory of the city of Issyk is very rich in finds. There's literally a landmark on the landmark. Does Issyk have a secret passage to other worlds? I think it is not by chance. Issyk comes from Kazakh word Yesyk, which means door. Why the door? Where did it lead to? Has the place where the golden man lived been found? The presence of the strange pyramid-shaped hill just suggested the Kenata idea that this was a kind of Troja, where this urban Saka infrastructure would be found. Archaeology, history, and mystic of Issyk in this episode. In Semirechye, there are many monuments of ancient civilizations. This land attracted the peoples who settled here. But there's another place in Jetsu that is interesting, not only from the point of view of history and archaeology, but also curiously as one of the most mystical and sacred. It is Issyk. My name is Andrei Slozhin, and this is the Time Puzzle. Almost all historians agree the Saka civilization is still very little studied. Sakas inhabited vast territories, from Siberia to the Black Sea. But Semirechye scientists consider a special place for the civilization. This is what Yermek Jasibayev, deputy director of the Issyk Museum Reserve, says. In general, the territory of the Semirechye is the heart of the Saka country, and in no other region can one find such a number of burials in kurgan, necropolises, burial grounds, and the elitism of these monumental structures. It is believed that the Sakas belong to the Iranian-speaking nomadic tribes. The name itself goes back to the ancient Scythian word Saka, which means deer. According to historians, these tribes are descendants of an even more ancient culture, Andronovo. The first written sources in which this people is mentioned were the Bechistan inscription of the Persian king Darius I, Chinese sources, as well as the fourth book history of Herodotus. The Greeks called them Scythians. Historians claim that there were three main tribes of the Saka: Homovarga, Paradraya, and Tigraksauda. One of the most famous Sakas, however, and the only more or less studied, is the famous Golden Man, found in Issyk in the late 60s of the 20th century. According to the design of the headdress, the crown of the Golden Man, it is clearly readable that he relates to the Sakas, the so-called Tigrasauda, mentioned by ancient Persian sources. Comparing the ancient Persian sources with the ancient Greek sources, the Saka Tigrasauda are similar to the Scythians, the so-called Otokaribanti, which means wearing pointed hats. Saka Haumavarga inhabited the valley of the Mugrab River flowing in the territory of the modern province of Afghanistan in the Tajik Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Region. Saka Paradraya, or overseas Sakas, lived in the basin of the Aral Sea and the lower reaches of the Sirdarya and Amudarya rivers. This chain of mountains, it was a single space for the habitats of the Saka of Tigrasauda. Similar elements are found in the burials of Altai. For example, the same burial mounds, the Bazavri kurgans from Russia, are Issyk kurgans. It is the territory of Semirechye that is rich in ritual destinations. Here in the main, we found a lot of boilers, the so-called tripods, which characterizes the Saka culture. In addition, lamps, incense burners. But I must say that for the most part, these are random finds. Apparently, the priests or clergymen performed some ritual actions, and these ritual objects were transferred from place to place, burying them in certain places, and later they were accidentally discovered by archaeologists. Almost by chance, the famous Golden Saka warrior was found. We managed to meet a man who was present at that moment on the site of a historical find, Alexander Matvienko. Although he was a teenager then, he remembers some circumstances.
В том месте был курятник колхозный когда-то, да, и на этих буграх там курей, грубо говоря, пошли. Потом там решили построить Иссыкскую базу, то есть там была хорошая база.
In that place there was a collective farm, chicken co-op once, and the chickens fed on these mounds. Then they decided to build an Issyk base. There was a good car base, but when they began to build it, they leveled the area for construction. There were several large mounds. When they began to level one of the mounds with a bulldozer, they touched part of the mound, and a niche opened. It all happened in the late afternoon. The bulldozer blocked the entrance to the mound with a shovel and went to inform the appropriate authorities. And we, the kids, we were running there. We herded cows there. This place was called Jibek. When we saw the discovery, it became so interesting to us. We immediately rushed there. At this time, my mom came to visit me. Well, we saw this niche and went down there, 3 of my friends and me. According to historians, until the moment when the Golden Man was discovered, little was known about the Saki. Basically, researchers based on ancient written sources and created a picture of life from the excavations, which did not give detailed answers. But this royal untouched burial provided rich material for research. Scientists began to understand how the spiritual and material life of the 7 rivers Sakas was arranged. It was a rather rich culture. If earlier in Soviet times, even now they claim that there was a great influence from Asia, the Front East, the Middle East on culture in particular, to the spiritual life. The bestial style of the Sakas tribes shows that there are autochthonous, precisely local motives, and apparently they had their local jewelers, craftsmen, who made quite thin jewelry, and their craftsmanship was rather high. The excavations, in addition to the skeleton of remnants of clothing and footwear, gold jewelry, vessels made of wood and silver, and weapons were found.
Я подошел к этой нише, все, а они уже полезли туда. Прорыли немножко между лопатой и бугром, они залезли туда.
I went to this niche and they have already got in there. They made a little entrance between the shovel and the hill so they could enter. The first thing I remember was a tray. They gave this tray to me. I took it as a shield, and then my mother came up, and at that time police officers arrived and we ran all away. In the end, all of us were caught, questioned, people arrived, most likely archaeologists, and they all looked at it. It was all sealed, but the rumor had already gone, and the tray was taken from me too. Rumors immediately spread around the village that a treasure was found. There were those who said that they should not disturb the dead. In general, the belief that the opening of the graves can bring trouble to people is widespread throughout the world. The existence of curses has not been proved by science, but the friends of Alexander Matvienko, who then climbed into the mound, actually suffered a sad fate. Nobody lived to be 40 years old. Someone got under the car. Someone developed illness for no reason. Someone even, in my opinion, committed suicide. I can't say for sure, but that they are no longer in this world, this is for sure. Something may have affected this, and I cannot say specifically that this is directly related to some kind of curse, because besides them, then, too many people have been there, and we were the first. I believe that the Lord protected me. He did not let me enter that mound, and they got there first. Children who got into the mound are not the only victims of this place. Arman Nurmuhanbetov, together with his father, Bek Muhanbet, for many years sought to build a museum in Issyk. The case went on for a long time, and they just lived on the mounds, studied them, conducted excursions, and this is what Arman tells about it.
На моих глазах, сколько мы там находились с отцом до строительства музея.
I saw it myself for how long we were there with my father before the construction of this museum. In 10 years, 4 people died there. Just the same people as you and I, who only worked directly there, or had some relation, some plans to this place. And when I analyze what they have in common, I understand that somewhere they have violated this principle of sincere attitude. They didn't do it with pure enthusiasm. They began to gain, they began to intrigue, they were cunning and had some selfish impulses. Therefore, I'm telling everyone that you shouldn't treat it that way when you deal with such sacred things.
Поэтому я всем говорю, что не стоит так относиться, когда ты имеешь дело именно вот с такими сакральными вещами.
The graves were considered sacred for the nomads. There was a whole cult of ancestors. After all, Sakas did not build temples to worship their gods in nature, they came to the burial sites.
И настолько это высоко ценилось, что, скажем, в ходе скифо-персидской войны...
And it all was so highly appreciated that during the Scythian-Persian War, when the nomads applied the traditional strategic retreat method to tire out the Persians, and the Persian king wrote a letter to the Scythian king, "Stop retreating, fight with me, if you're a man, if you're not afraid." The answer of the Scythian king, Edanfers, sounded like this: "We do what we usually do, wander where we want. And if you want to know how brave we are, that we are men and warriors, find the graves of our ancestors and destroy them, and then you will see if we will fight with you."
Разрушь их, и тогда увидишь, будем ли мы сражаться.
In the 4th century BC, Alexander the Great went to conquer Central Asia. He destroyed cities along the Sirdarya River, killed many men, and captured Saka children and women. Macedonian ordered to lay the city of Alexandria as Hata, which means Alexandria Extreme. As convinced by the commander, he was to become a stronghold on the border of his new possessions. According to some historians, they began to use stones from Saka barrows to build the city. Such arrogance infuriated nomads. They opened fire with bows at the troops of Macedonian, to which they responded by firing from catapults. Sakas were forced to retreat. Alexander with his army went after them. He did not even suspect that he had fallen on the cunning trick of the nomads, because the tactics of the Sakas were to force the enemy to go in pursuit, sharply turn the horses back, and again attack the enemy. In this battle, Alexander the Great was wounded. He had to conclude a peace treaty with the Saka tribes. The eastward movement was stopped. Macedonian went to Marakand, or as it was called, Samarkand, to the remaining soldiers. According to some historians, if the people of Macedonia did not disturb the graves of the ancestors of the Sakas, then everything could be completely different.
Курганы, могильники, вот прах предков — это было высшей святыней. Соответственно, скорее всего, на протяжении...
Burial mounds, burial grounds, the dust of ancestors, this was the highest shrine. Accordingly, since people visited these places, they prayed here, performed rituals. Apparently, the energy of these places was very powerfully saturated. Or the second option, and it is said by energy experts that the burial sites themselves were most likely located on some places of power, as they say. Coming up next, Shambhala in the Issyk Mountains. Many alternative historians and researchers attribute the tragic events in Issyk, namely the mud flow in 1963, to the fact that the habitual order of the world order established by the ancient Sakas priests was disrupted in this region. With the active development of these places, people came to the sacred passage that, according to legends, leads to another world. The historian Arman Nurmuhanbetov also talks about it.
Я думаю, не случайно вот это название «Исык» в русском варианте, а в казахском «Есык» — это дверь.
I think it is not by chance. Issyk comes from Kazakh word Yesik, which means door. Why the door? Where did it lead? Shambhala. Everyone is looking for the Shambhala, if it is there. But most likely these ancient myths and maybe popular beliefs do connect it with a certain world of ancestors. I don't know, with the heavenly world, with something supreme, because nothing comes from nothing. According to alternative historians, Shambhala is a mythical country located in Tibet. Esoteric believe in the reality of its existence. In addition, they believe that the people of Shambhala can manage time and space. Vasily Shupeikin, a writer and journalist, once met one of the followers of such ideas.
На берегах озера Исык живет удивительный философ, суфий. Он служит егерем.
On the shores of the lake Issyk lives an amazing philosopher, a Sufi. He serves as a huntsman there. He dressed in uniform. I spoke with him. His most interesting story is about why the Issyk and Issyk-Kul are interconnected, why this place is considered sacred, why pilgrims came there. He has been exploring this theory for all his life. It can be said scientific because he obtained indirect evidence.
Шамбала находится именно между Исыком и Иссык-Кулем, и поэтому вот такие одинаковые названия у этих двух озер, которые оказывают...
He assured me that it is proved that Shambhala lies precisely between the Issyk and the Issyk-Kul. And therefore, these two lakes have the same names, which, it turns out, are also connected by an underground water passage to each other. It is no coincidence that all the ancient heroes of all the peoples of the world were looking for this passage into the heavenly world. Many of them found something there and brought it back to the people. Why cannot we assume that this door is in the Issyk? There is no evidence for this, but there is no evidence of this. From all times to this day, a huge number of people come to Issyk who claim to possess some kind of supernatural powers. They are sure that one of the entrances to the mythical world is located just in the mountains between the lakes Issyk-Kul and Issyk. From the east side, the pilgrims came here to the door, to Shambhala, to the Most High. All settlements are within walking distance. Here, before the Issyk, there is Turgan. Turgan is a resting site. They stopped there, cleaned themselves up, and then went to the Issyk clean, in order to give the divine their wishes, their requests, in order to communicate with the Most High.
Останавливались, приводили себя в порядок, очищались и шли тогда уже в Исsyk чистыми, чтобы отдать божеству свои пожелания, свои просьбы, чтобы пообщаться со Всевышним.
There is also a scientific theory why this place is called Yesik, the door. Thus, according to written sources, it was Alexander the Great who became the catalyst for world trade and introduced the prerequisites for establishing trade relations between the states he conquered. This is how the Silk Road came about. A resident of the city of Issyk, a local ethnographer, Murat Nakataev, makes this assumption.
Что касается самого слова «Исsyk», оно не русское слово, оно и не казахское слово.
As for the word Issyk, it is not a Russian word, it is not a Kazakh word. Issyk, in my opinion, is a Turkic-speaking since the times of the Turkish tribes. Issyk is a translation from their word, approximately according to the forecast or according to the research of academician Aldual Kaidarov. This is a sacred place, a sacred lake.
Священное место, священное озеро. Она превратилась, в конце концов, в слово «Исsyk». «Есик», что означает...
It eventually became the word Yesik, Yesik, which means the door. What does the door mean? This means, as I believe, exit to the east, since the Great Silk Road did not pass along this lower Kulja tract. It passed along the mountain.
Нижний Кульжинский тракт, она вдоль горы проходила.
An important role in the development of the Silk Road was also played by the Saka tribes who lived in the territory of modern Kazakhstan and in particular in the Semirachi area. According to historians, one of the branches of the trade road passed through Issyk. And since there is a mountainous terrain here, it is quite possible that one of the gorges was a kind of natural corridor that led to the side of the neighboring country of Kyrgyzstan.
Это, с одной стороны, удивительно, но с другой стороны, вполне логично.
On the one hand, it is surprising, but on the other hand, it is quite logical that all these cities are like one chain were located on the Silk Road, and the recent finds of archaeologists not far from the Issyk region proved it, as a piece of silk was found here. It shows that in those days this path was already established and the trade was on. This trade also came from the west. Objects were found in the Scythian animal style, which means that they were made here, but from non-native material, from amber. Issyk was a sacred place at all times. Now a lot of tourists come here, and each has its own energy. Someone doesn't like this place, someone is charged with energy. There are those who feel nothing but natural beauty. For each, Issyk is his own, unique. Coming up next, new sensations of Issyk. Numerous burial mounds and the discovery of a golden warrior, according to many scholars, suggest that there should be a Saka city here, and perhaps it already had been found, although according to the same scientists, it is too early to draw accurate conclusions. In 1999, my father and I set up yurts in the place of the current Issyk Museum, announced that there would be a museum here, and conducted excursions for people. And in the same summer, a local man came to us from the village of Rahat and started telling that there is a hill near their village, which is called Tort Burish, which means 4 corners, although in fact there are 5 corners, but people got used to this name. And indeed, if you look this way from the road, you will immediately notice some even slopes.
И действительно, если с трассы смотреть в эту сторону, то он сразу бросается в глаза какими-то вот ровными такими.
This guy was telling us that there was something interesting at that hill, and that they kept finding some little skulls there. There must be a reason behind that. So my father got interested. They got into a car and went there to see.
Туда посмотреть.
The village of Rahat is located in the Yanbekshi Kazakh district, 5 kilometers from the town of Issyk. From the unusual hills, the whole district is perfectly visible. One can also see the Saka mounds.
Когда я увидел отца, я не мог вспомнить, когда у него был такой ошарашенный.
When I saw my father, I was surprised at how stunned he looked. That is, he did not know what to say. He stood thinking and stroking his beard. And then we began to go there more often, to measure, inspect from all sides. He began to bring his friends, archaeologists, primarily Karl Baipakov, a specialist in cities. They made a mine and identified. Yes, the cultural layer of Saka time is obvious. One of the first assumptions of archaeologists was that this is most likely a fortress. Huge mounds in the shape of a pyramid with a truncated tip. It was probably man-made structure, although the version is allowed that the hills are of natural origin. But it is obvious that people removed the upper layer of the soil.
Там было обнаружено 3 комплекса, которые, возможно, являются одним, но...
3 complexes were found there, which are probably one piece, but some of it was called Orikti, respectively according to the nearby village. But the main one is still Rahat.
2 крепостных вала округлой формы, и в центре цитадель пятиугольная, пентагон.
A stunning structure which has 2 ramparts, and there is a pentagon in the center of the citadel, and the citadel is 50 meters in height. It is an imposing structure, girded with 2 shafts, and having a stepped form so that the bowmen located on these 3 levels could shoot all the surrounding space above each other's heads.
Расстреливать все окружающее пространство.
In 2004, for the first time, preliminary excavations were carried out to establish the cultural layer. What was the surprise of archaeologists when in a small square they found 2 thunder furnaces at once? Such a finding only showed one thing. If it was an ordinary dwelling, they would not put 2 ovens there, which means that this is either a bakery or a hotel for travelers, the so-called caravanserai. Archaeologist Alexei Chekin told us all about it. When excavation is laid, it is usually laid in squares. There remain stratigraphic shafts so that you can read the ground. 2 thunder-type furnaces were found in the second square. They have a special composition, refractory clay with inclusions of stone for heat resistance. Well, was this the caravanserai which you spoke about? I mean, supposedly. Yes, this question is being investigated. We cannot identify dating right now, but we have material with which specialists will work directly in the field of different, periods of Kazakhstan, analyze, compile, search for analogies to give some more accurate dating. But the stones on the hill, what is it? This is such a thing when the turf layer, it covers the ancient surface, only then the humus layer arose with time, and some stones, they give us the definition of an ancient surface. These furnaces stood on an ancient surface. Now we have already gone deep at the moment. This land, we are now standing below the ancient surface, that is, below the floor level. Here's the fragments of the hearth. Fragments of ceramics were found during excavations here. Ceramics is handmade, and the dating of ceramics is also different.
Очага. Вот, здесь при сносе бровки было фрагмент керамики обнаружен. Вот, керамика есть личинка лепная, есть ручная. И датировка керамики тоже разная.
Another proof that the ancient Sakas city with a developed infrastructure quite possibly was located in this territory is also the so-called middens.
Это вот что за такие углубления?
Это дно хозяйственной ямы.
What are those pits? This is the bottom of a midden. A midden itself was a higher level. I will show you. Approximately 70 centimeters in height. Many middens are about the same size. This suggests that they were still used as a kind of measure for feed grain or something else. Measuring pit for household purposes. Products were stored there. For example, in one of them we saw the fragments of hum. Most likely the grain was stored both in ceramics and without any vessels. When the soil is removed during the archaeological excavation, it is removed in layers, and each layer is red. For example, at this level, this continuation of the pit is clearly seen. Can you see the color is different? That is filling of the pit of the same color and the surrounding surface. The other, it is the so-called untouched earth. The main dream of archaeologists today is to find the royal chambers and forges where they made jewelry for the costume of the Golden Man. Archaeologists are sure the chance that there was precisely Sakas city is big. This is proved by a lot of circumstantial evidence.
Именно сакский город, потому что Бекен-Ата по всем признакам говорил, что где-то здесь он есть, должен быть.
It is the Sakas city because, by all accounts, the Beken-Ata said that it must be somewhere. Because we have a fairly large number of bronze boilers, which implies copper smelting production. Yes, even the Golden Man's costume itself is quite a complicated thing to manufacture, which involves stationary, premises, and rather dense demographics, because indeed building such monumental mounds requires big population. When you see mounds 21 meters high, you need to know that it was not built by slaves driven by whips. They were built by free warriors bringing a handful of earth. The more respected a person, the higher his mound. Archaeologists have calculated that the creation of one such mound requires more than 6,000 cubic meters of stone and soil. In modern terms, this is about 100 truckloads. The size of the Issyk burial mounds indicates that these burials belong to noble and respected people.
Наличие именно царского дворца, палат царских, предполагает именно вот такой сложный такой вот...
The presence of the royal palace presupposes a complex infrastructure, security. This is, for example, the palace of the king, the chamber of his closest entourage, the chamber of the queen, the chamber of the guards. All this must be somewhere within the 20-30 kilometers from the royal burials themselves, and the presence of the strange pyramid-shaped hill just suggests that the thought that this is a kind of Troy, where this urban Saka infrastructure will be found.
Будет найдена вот эта, так скажем, городская сакская инфраструктура.
Any large city needs water supply. This condition is met in the town of Rahat. A mountain river flows nearby. In the study of the territory, archaeologists also found a place overgrown with reeds near the settlement. There was a spring.
Вот эта местность питалась двумя способами. Заводилось русло реки на вот эту платформу.
This area was supplied by water in two ways. The riverbed was built on this platform, and the second way, here the spring is of natural origin, and apparently there was a channel to the settlement itself.
Одна из гипотез говорит о том, что это было не просто...
One hypothesis suggests that it was not just a fortification. So, for example, Armand Nurmuhanbetov believes that the ancient settlement of Rahat was a kind of sacred place for the Sakas, perhaps even a religious center.
С одной стороны, это фортификационное сооружение, но с другой стороны, оно имеет еще некие...
On the one hand, it is a fortification, but on the other hand, it still has some apparently sacral meaning, because for some unknown reason, there is not one entrance, but two.
Я говорил, конкретно Иссыкская крепость, Рахат, городище Рахат, интересно тем, что оно не только имеет фортификационное значение.
What is a fortress? As I have already said, Rahat Fortress, the ancient city of Rahat, is interesting because it is not just a fortification, but also it looks like some sacred place. This is indicated not only by the double gate, and there is not only the functional purpose, but another one. And here is another question. The settlement is perfectly fortified from the north and east side, and it is actually an impregnable wall.
Прекрасно укреплено, и это фактически неприступная стена. Но с западной стороны овладеть ее довольно-таки просто. Там высота.
But on the west side it is pretty weak. There the height of the wall is almost at the same level as the continuing on the hill. And from this side the enemy could attack and take this fortress with little effort. But all this is only theories and assumptions. The Issyk excavations are surrounded by many unsolved mysteries and riddles.
Это место посещают всякого рода экстрасенсы, колдуны.
This place is visited by all sorts of physics, sorcerers, shamans, and so on. Everyone has visions here, dreams, inner voices, and so on. But what unites them? For some reason, they're instructed to come to the mound, perform some rituals, and so on. And accordingly, there was one of them, out of the series of several strange people.
Вот таких видящих, ясновидящих, женщина приехала, не зная о том, что мы обнаружили там город, почему-то спросила об этом городе.
There was a woman. She was one of those seers, clairvoyants. She came here not knowing that we found a city there. For some reason, she asked me about the city and immediately said that there are two gates there. So not seeing, not knowing, in some vision she was shown that there is some sacred center there. And in antiquity, it had such esoteric spiritual goals. Some theories are frankly insane. Someone considers Issyk a local UFO base and so on. There were cases when people who had never heard of Issyk suddenly had dreams about this place, in which some voice ordered them to come there. One day a young man, after a similar dream, came to Issyk from Tashkent by bicycle.
Сакральное же означает буквально духовное, да, что-то такое глубинное.
Sacral means spiritual, something so deep. For me, personally, and for many of those who have been there, it is sacred in some kind of inexplicable trembling of the soul. Who has been there even wants to stay there to buy a house. Many have done so. Or some people want to go back there, participate in expeditions, excavations, or just bring some benefit to this place. This is often such an inexplicable inner subjective feeling. I would seem that the learned people are skeptics. They do not believe in various spirits, secret messages, and the like. The work of archaeologists is hard work, reconnaissance expeditions, a long study of the artifacts found. There are also occasional finds. But all scientists working in Issyk claim that there are too many of these accidents here. One curious story happened to the discoverer of the Golden Man, Bek Muhanbet Nurmuhanbetov. In the spring of 2005, a high-ranking delegation arrived here. Deputies of parliament asked to show the burial place where the Golden Man was found. You know, right now there is a carpool there. Some other people arrived, apparently with sacrificial ram. They made a sacrifice and then began to walk around behind this carpool. Apparently, those people had some extrasensory abilities. They began to communicate with the spirits. They called a digger and said, "Dig at this place, we will find funding for you." The money was indeed found. A camp was set up. He begins to dig and accidentally stumbles on masonry. Later it turned out that here, right on this place, there was a sanctuary on the Bronze Age, approximately 10th century BC. Now, on the site of the ancient settlement of Rahat, excavations are underway. It is quite possible that an ancient Sakas city where the famous golden warrior lived will be found here. However, it takes time and money. After all, the process of studying history is not fast and requires scrupulousness and caution. Each found trifle can be valuable and open wide spots in the history of the Saka people who lived in the territory of the modern city of Issyk.
Сакская культура является одной из самых ярких в истории Великой Степи и с характерными выработанными уже формами.
Saka culture is one of the brightest in the history of the Great Steppe, with characteristic, already developed forms of everyday manifestation, with household tools, with a nomadic way of life, with a bright, unique, decorative world, animal style, with characteristic weapons and robes.
Характерным оружием и одеяниями. Им, естественно, предшествовали и так называемые арии, это бронзовый век.
They naturally were preceded by so-called Arias. This is the Bronze Age, not less glorious epoch, but not so vividly represented, and one can say they could even be such a passing tribe in this territory. Because the Arias haven't created chariots, they began to seize space and rush to the west, to the east, to the south. You can find their traces in India, China, Europe. Where did the great Saka civilization go? Those who come to Issyk seeking the higher forces and find the entrance to Shambhala believe that the Saka priests led their people to this mysterious country. It is from there that they watch over their land and protect it. Some esoteric argue that this is why, with those who come to Issyk with bad thoughts and selfish goals, often suffer from various troubles and misfortunes.
Изначально отец нам говорил, что
Father originally told us that we are not just guides here. He also said this to the museum staff when it was built. You are not just guides here. You are Shirakshi. You are the keepers of this holy place. Without a doubt, Issyk has a special and attractive energy. Green hills, spacious meadows, endless sky, all this is more like earthly paradise. So why did the Sakas leave such a blessed place? Is it really true that they were attracted by the mysterious Shambhala? In fact, everything is much simpler. Sakas did not disappear. They assimilated with other nations.
На смену сакским племенам семиречья Житесу
To replace the Saka tribes of the Seven Rivers Jetisu, other tribes come, perhaps even some scholars assume that they are their direct descendants, the Uyusun tribes. They lived on the territory of Jetisu and further to the south of the territory of present-day Kyrgyzstan, but we learn about them from ancient Chinese sources, chronicles. It mentions the whole state of Usungo. You know that the capital of this state was on the shores of the now Issyk Lake, the so-called Chiguchen, the city of the Red Valley. This culture was founded at the turn of the first centuries of our era, and they remained here until the 3rd century of our era. Well, later, the Proto-Turkic tribes came here. An excavation is long and expensive, and to dig up a whole settlement is worth tens of thousands of dollars and many years of hard work of archaeologists, because the main work is seasonal in nature, because they cannot dig in winter.
Городище занимает сотни гектаров.
The mound occupies hundreds of hectares, and in order to arrive at some conclusion on the basis of scientific, verified data, a lot of work still needs to be done.
Весь научный мир с нетерпением ждет.
The entire scientific world is looking forward to new sensational findings on the excavations of the ancient city of Rahat. And I want to believe that they will be done. As for the city of Issyk, then it certainly needs to be visited, at least in order to wander through the hills, breathe clean, fresh air, and visit the museum on the barrows. The main thing to remember is you have to go here with a pure heart and bright thoughts. My name is Andrei Slozhin, and it was the Time Puzzle. See you.